Looks like people are connecting, getting in here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Letting everybody hop in. We do have lots of people joining right now, so please keep yourself muted for now so we don't get any background. Perfect. Okay, well, make sure we're set. Great. So welcome, everyone. I know people are still getting settled, so welcome. My name is Carly Murphy, and I am the Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator at the Tahoe Resource Conservation District. While everybody's getting settled here, we're going to have Christina launch some polls so we can get familiar with some technology. We'll just get a little bit of an introduction here. And Christina, we are just about to 9 o'clock, so take your time in this intro here.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So today we're planning to use this really cool online feature called menti.com for polls throughout the day. And so the way that we can do this is you can either use your cell phone and you can go to menti.com, or you can use it on your browser, on your computer, if you'd like. I think it's easier on my phone. And then you will be asked to enter a code. The code is written here, 9305985. It's also going to be on the top of every single slide. So if you look on the top, you can see that code. You only have to enter the code once. If you, for some reason, if you delete that off of your phone, you may be asked again. This will be the code for the whole day. This is kind of a fun new way that we like to use for polls for folks to learn how to use some online technology. So anyways, we'll get started with our first poll here. So where are you from? So again, just enter that code. If you go to menti.com and enter the code 9305985, we should start to be able to see where people are from. Now this is really cool. All right, we've got people, Reno, Colorado, Big Island of Hawaii, I saw on there. That's so awesome that you're here with us. Roslyn, Washington, I have been there. I love the town of Roslyn. Evergreen, Colorado, Washington State, Inland Empire, California. I was born in the Inland Empire. Santa Clara, California, Washington State. I went to grad school in Washington. Lone Tree, Colorado. We got people from all over the United States. This is so cool. We've got Puerto Rico in the house. That's awesome. Laguna Beach, California. It's honestly hard to read all the different places. Jackson, Wyoming, Santa Barbara, Berkeley, my alma mater. Lone Tree, I'm not sure I know whether that is. I know where Lone Pine is. East Madera County, Leavenworth, Washington. We got a lot of Washington people, a lot of Colorado people, lots of South Lake Tahoe in the center there, lots of Truckee, Reno, Oregon. This is awesome. Thanks everybody for participating in this one. We're gonna move on to the next question here. What is your job title or your affiliation? So are you fire inspector, defensible space inspector, a community member, etc. So let's see what we got here. Fire inspector, fire captain, outreach coordinator, deputy fire marshal, program manager, forestry assistant, folks from the Fire Safe Council, utilities, RCDs. This is exactly the audience we wanted to reach. So this is fantastic to see all these different people, community leaders, CERT member, prevention officer, educator, fire education specialist, program coordinator, battalion chief. We've kind of got the gamut here. In the middle, we got a lot of fire marshals. So just so folks know, the larger the word, the more of you entered that same word. All right, we're gonna move on to the next one here. It's so hard to stop because so many people are entering. WUI specialist, you can continue to enter and we will have the information. I'm gonna move on to the next one here. What are you hoping to learn from the workshop today? So let's let people start entering in here. These are short answers, so they might take a little bit longer to enter. Ember impacts, home hardening techniques, meet similar people. We do have a lot of opportunity for folks to network today. What others are teaching, home hardening, how to communicate home hardening techniques, talk to homeowners, recommendations for homeowners. Keep scrolling down here. Here we go. Home hardening techniques. Lots about home hardening. Well, you came to the right place. We can certainly teach you about home hardening. Ember impacts. All right, I think we're going to keep on moving here. And then what is your comfort with home hardening concepts? And we'll just let you guys answer this last one. All right, we've got some people saying they're already comfortable communicating about home hardening. But I like the second one here. I'm often asked about home hardening, but don't know the information. That is where a lot of people are. That's where I used to be, but I'm not there anymore. I don't know anything about home hardening. Glad that you guys came here today to learn more about it. Not quite sure what's going on with this third bar here. We've got a lot of different numbers on it, so sorry about that. All right, with that, that's going to end the morning polls. I'm going to switch it back over to Carly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christina. That was really great to see. All right, so we should be seeing my presentation now. That'll be up and loading here in a second, but welcome again to everybody to our workshop. So my name is Carly Murphy, and I'm the Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator at the Tahoe Resource Conservation District, and I coordinate the Tahoe network of fire adapted communities. So I'm going to go over a few kind of housekeeping items, things we want you to be aware of. This is going to be a very interactive workshop, as you already can see. We just had a big interactive poll, but we will continue to have those along with many other things. So I'm going to give you also a few Zoom tips. So myself, as well as Amanda Malishi, who will be introducing herself here in a little bit as well, we will be facilitating the workshop today. So feel free to connect with us if you have any questions or anything. So let me progress here. So an intro to Zoom. I'd imagine a lot of you already know about Zoom, but in case you don't know, I'll give you a brief overview. So we will be using a few different Zoom features today. And so I'm just gonna let you briefly know about those. So, and first and foremost, before I dive in any farther, I do wanna point out, because we are using some new technology, we do have someone available for you if you come across any issues. So Susie Coker has graciously volunteered to help us today if anybody has any sort of tech issue. So I think Nicole will put her contact information in the chat box. So if you can't come off mute, or you get lost in cyberspace and you're confused, Susie is your person today. So let us contact her if you have any problems. Now, as far as a Zoom introduction, please, there's a lot of people on this workshop today. It was just so fantastic. We're so excited to have you all here. But please keep yourself muted. There will be lots of opportunities for you to come off mute, introduce yourself, have a conversation with others. But we do ask, while we're in this large space here, to keep yourself muted unless we call on you specifically. Also, we recognize, we're in this new normal, letting everybody into your homes. You know that I ski, you can see right behind me. It is a little invasive. So if you do not feel comfortable sharing your video, or you don't want to share your video because you aren't as productive when you do that, no worries, don't worry about it. So, but if you do feel comfortable, share it. I want everybody to feel comfortable in this space to share or not share as they wish. I did mention raising hands. So throughout the workshop, we will ask you to raise your hand to enter into different conversations. If you would like to raise your hand, you click on the participants button, which will be at the bottom of your screen, and you can raise hand. Now, I'm ready to practice this. So navigate to that participant channel and raise your hand right now, and then Amanda will
Hey, Carly, we're having a little audio issue.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that last part for us about raising your hand?
Oh, so sorry. Yeah. So can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. Yep. So at the bottom of your screen, if you open up your participants panel, you should be able to raise your hand. You know, raise your hand so it shows that you know how to do that here, and then we'll look at them all.
You're really cutting out, Carly. I'm not sure what's going on, but maybe
Shoot.
Amanda should describe those next slides.
Yep. Please do, Amanda.
Yep. So for those who missed that, Carly was just describing the raising hand feature. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you should see the participants button. If you click that and find yourself and click at the very bottom, there should be a raise hand box. So if everyone wants to go ahead and try that, just to make sure it works. Cool, I see some hands being raised. We'll give folks a couple more seconds here, and then I'll go ahead and lower your hands. All right, cool. Looks like everyone's got that. Another feature we have is the chat feature. So feel free to use that throughout the workshop. Again, it's going to be very interactive, so you can ask our participants questions and talk amongst each other. So yeah, you'll find the chat box right there at the bottom. And then the next feature you should see is speaker view up at the top right. So we will be having a couple of sessions where we'll be doing sort of a Q&A style with our presenter, and we think it's a little more productive if folks have speaker view on so that they're just seeing who's talking at that moment or seeing who's asking questions instead of seeing just a bunch of boxes with people's faces. So you can go ahead and turn speaker view on at the top right. And then when you're in your breakout rooms talking with each other, you can turn that off back to gallery view so that you can see everyone in your room. How are you doing on audio, Carly?
I am working on it, but can you please just keep going just in case?
Yep, are we ready for the next slide? Awesome, so here is our agenda today. So we just did our welcome, we're doing our introductions here. We're gonna pop into a breakout room where you all will be in groups of, I think it's 3, and you'll have a chance to talk with each other for about 8 minutes. And then we're going to go into a home hardening presentation with our home hardening expert, and he'll go over the basics and the highlights of home hardening. We're then going to go into a Q&A session, and it's going to be sort of celebrity interview style. So we're going to be talking about some hot topics and commonly asked questions about home hardening. After that, we'll be doing an interactive activity. We have some photos of homes that everyone will be able to look at and discuss in breakout rooms to see what they would recommend to homeowners in certain scenarios. We're then going to have a 10-minute break, so if you have to use the bathroom or take care of things at your house, at 10:40 will be your opportunity to do that. We're then going to pop into another Q&A session, and it's going to be what we call Fishbowl style, where people will come in and out to ask questions for our presenter again. And then we're going to finish up with another interactive activity where we have 2 experts here who are going to present how they communicate home hardening techniques. And then you will have the opportunity to chat with them and ask them questions during that time. And then lastly, we'll finish up with just some closing thoughts. All right, so can you hear me okay now, Amanda? Yep, you sound perfect.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. This has happened a couple times, but cut me off, Amanda, if we have any issues. So a brief project overview before we dive into the big piece of the workshop. So I wanted to give kind of lay the framework for this larger project that we've been working on. So we first did a workshop for the public, which was very well attended, and we were just so grateful to have so many great people attend and gain a lot out of it. Second, we had a workshop for building professionals where we actually did a train the trainer for building professionals so they can then implement home hardening techniques within their communities. And then last, we right now are hosting this workshop for fire professionals and educators. So I wanted to point out that if you miss any of these workshops and you're interested in sharing them with your community, we have them all recorded. And I'm going to ask Nicole to place that link to our Tahoe Living with Fire YouTube channel in the chat box now. Just kind of, if you want to expand or share it with building professionals, you know that's a great place to do so. And then kind of the grand finale for this project and what we're most excited about is the publication of the Wildfire Home Retrofit Guide. This has been a very long time coming. We've been working with a team of experts who I'll acknowledge here in a second to come up with this peer-reviewed publication and that we are so, so proud of. And that is it's not Tahoe specific, it's not California or Nevada specific. This truly will be a first of its kind guide that we are so happy to share with everyone. And at the end of the workshop, I'll give a little bit of information on how you can share that guide with your community once it is out. All right, now before I hand it over for a little activity, I wanted to acknowledge, of course, all of our partners on this project. So big partners, University of California and University of Nevada Cooperative Extension. And of course, this project was funded by CAL FIRE and California's Climate Investments Program. So a huge thanks to all of those folks who made this workshop happen. Okay, so now we're going to move into another interactive activity for us. So because we're in a very large group, there's over 200 people here, we are going to split up into some breakout rooms and really just an opportunity for you to meet people a little more one-on-one. So if you haven't done breakout rooms, don't panic. We won't lose you in cyberspace. You will automatically be sent out to your breakout room, and then you will be brought right back into this main room. You'll be placed with about 5 people for about 8 minutes. So you'll have time to all introduce yourselves and talk about what you hope to get out of this workshop. So Christina, are we ready for the breakout room?
Yep, we are ready. I'm going to launch them right now during some of these things. All right, Carly.
Yes. Thank you so much, Christina. Great. So I hope that you met someone new. Feel free to tell us in the chat box who you met or what kind of great conversations you had in those rooms. We are going to move it forward, and I'm going to pass it over to Amanda. You kind of already met her earlier, but I'm going to pass it over to Amanda so we can move on to our main presentation for the day. So Amanda, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Carly. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Milici, and I'm an outreach specialist and AmeriCorps member for Tahoe Resource Conservation District and the Tahoe Network of Fire Adapted Communities. And today it is my pleasure to introduce our home hardening expert, Dr. Stephen Quarles. He will be presenting all of the home hardening highlights. And Steve is a University of California Cooperative Extension Advisor Emeritus and the retired Chief Scientist for Wildfire and Durability at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety Research Center. So if you can tell by his title, Steve really is an expert and has a wealth of knowledge in this topic, and we're so lucky to have him here. So Steve, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks all, and thank you all for joining today. So this is a sort of an overview of home hardening issues that I'm going to be talking about today. We can get to your individual questions along during the course of the day, but we're trying to keep this short presentation at sort of a high level. And we are going to focus on the built environment or the home or building. Okay. So I think a lot of these pictures you've seen before, but just to reiterate, your home or a home when that's exposed to wildland fire needs to be able to resist 3 different kinds of exposure. So we'll sort of take these from left to right on the screen. So wind-blown embers, these sort of same things as firebrands. We'll talk a little bit more about embers along the way. Radiant heat. It's kind of the heat you feel standing in front of a campfire. It's a lot higher than that, and radiant heat can preheat your siding. It can break glass and windows. It can ignite siding, for example, if it's high enough and long enough. And then direct flame contact if flames touch your home. This is a thing you really want to avoid at all costs. It's like putting your hand in the fire. You know, But you'll notice in this particular upper right-hand picture, the fire was able to burn directly to the building, ignited it, and there you see it burning. So these are the three kinds of exposures. A lot of post-fire assessments have indicated that 60 to 90% of home ignitions during wildland fire scenarios are from embers. This is a well-used picture, but it really shows how embers are important. You notice a lot of green vegetation around this particular destroyed home. This is Angora Fire 2007, South Lake Tahoe. The wildland fire did not burn to this building home and ignited. It was embers from it or embers from other burning things. It could have been another home, for example, that landed on, in, or near this particular home, ignited it, and resulted in its destruction. So a good example of why embers are so important. Embers are important because of what they can do directly and what they can do indirectly. The upper left-hand picture is from the research center that IBHS operates in South Carolina. It's just about an hour south of Charlotte, North Carolina, but it's in a rural part of South Carolina. That lab is focused on natural hazard sort of investigations on the built environment. So buildings, it's a large wind tunnel facility. You can put full-size buildings in. I was mostly involved with wildfire research, and you can see these ember generators that we had operating. We learned a fair amount on vulnerabilities of buildings to embers, and almost equally important mitigation strategies that worked, or we could evaluate the effectiveness of mitigation strategies. So ember generator up in the left-hand corner, the middle picture, a fence. So direct ember ignition, embers ignited this fence without the help of any other thing, and no other combustibles were in it, just the fence and the materials that built the fence. You'll notice that there is this horizontal ledge and the vertical plank, and then the 4x4 post. Embers lodged in that area, ignited the fence. So this is an example of direct ember ignition. Indirect ember ignition is when embers ignite something on or near the home that results in a flame contact or radiant heat exposure to the home. So we see the debris and gutter being ignited. We see bark mulch on the ground being ignited. You have flames to the edge of the roof or flames to the siding. So anyway, this is an example of indirect ember ignition. It's a combination of these direct and indirect ignition scenarios that makes ember such an important part in home ignitions or building ignitions during wildland fire. What can you do? Big picture is that homes survive wildland fire by homeowners or building owners incorporating what I call a coupled approach. So you want to do things on your property in terms of a location, maintenance, and selection of combustibles. This includes vegetation and other things such as your wood pile, such as your RV, things that burn. You want to make sure that they're appropriately located, and in terms of vegetation, has to be appropriately maintained. And then things you do to the house itself to make it able to resist either ember exposures or other kinds of exposures that it might see. So if you take this, just take this picture, you can imagine that embers igniting vegetation somewhere away from the home. There's enough vegetation on the property that the fire could burn to the home. And this would be an example of where either radiant heat and or flames could just touch the home. But if all of that vegetation were gone, embers can fly, wind-blown embers during wildland fires can go easily upwards of half a mile. There are reports of a long distance, but in order to have enough embers with enough energy and number to do something, you're talking easily though, quarter, half a mile. And most of us don't own that much property that you can adjust vegetation and other combustibles to make that not happen. So even if you have no vegetation on your property, the home has to be able to resist ember exposures. And that's why this ember thing is so important. And that's why we're going to focus on things you can do to your home to make it resist embers. A lot of things that we're going to be talking about assume good defensible space. If you don't have good defensible space, then where flames or radiant heat can be a factor in your home survival, then we'll have to do other things that in terms of material selection that would be better able to resist embers, radiant heat, or heaven forbid, flames. So I'm going to show a short video here. You look at this. This is a sort of a top-down view of a home in the test chamber at IBHS Research Center. And you can sort of envision this is pretty good defensible space because there's like no vegetation there except for stuff near the home, on the roof, and in the gutters. So this is all about the ember. So let's turn this guy on. It'll take a minute. This is about a 10-year-old video, but it's still a good demonstration. These are our first generation ember generators where we were batch feeding them. We're on like generation 4 now, so it's sort of an automatic feed. It can run for hours. It ran for 10 or 15 minutes and then we were done. We're sort of loading there the debris bark mulch near the home. Here the generators are running, and then we will see, okay, so I'm gonna stop it for a second. I want you to just take a look. You have embers sort of landing on the roof in the gutter. You can see them landing against this window screen. So you'll notice that this is an open window. The embers are being kept out of the home as long as that screen is functioning. You're gonna see, start to see bark mulch ignite, debris in gutters ignite, and debris on roof ignite here. Doggone it, sorry about that. Well, I'm not gonna do that again. I'm gonna fast forward just a little bit more. Just show you how much a little bit more I can do there. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to stop it. We'll just start. I'll talk through it. So you know what we're going to be looking for: embers igniting things near the building. You can see a little bit of a fire towards the right there on the ground. You can see ignition of debris in the gutter. The left-hand gutter is vinyl. You're going to see it detach and fall to the ground pretty quickly. On the right-hand side, it's a metal gutter. It's going to stay put. So it's going to be flames at the edge of the roof issue for the duration of debris in the gutter. You can see debris in the valley. So this is a Class A roof. And so debris will ignite, but it won't burn through into the attic space. That's sort of the idea. This is just a different view. You can see embers against the screen. You can see that vinyl gutter detach again. You can see the metal gutter. And here we have a big fire in that interior or re-entrant corner. This is what caused us to put the fire out because of this blazing thing. We're gonna, I think, go inside the building. You can see that the screen failed at that window and you have flames entering. So that screen worked fine until flames touched it. This was a plastic clad fiberglass screen, so definitely meltable, let's say. But screens in general don't stop flames, but they do stop our embers. But if it had been a metal screen, some flame would have still entered that area. That was a good, sort of overview of what embers can do. As I said, we're going to be talking about the built environment or your home or building itself, with the exception, not so much on defensible space, but I want to sort of carve out a certain part of defensible space. And that is the part right next to your home and under the footprint of any attached deck. You want to minimize combustibles in these areas. So their left-hand picture, Colorado Springs after the Waldo Canyon fire. Center picture, same house, Waldo Canyon fire, Colorado Springs. This is a good example of what you want the area next to your home to look like. You can't store your own personal lumberyard under your deck and expect that deck to perform well. Before embers enter into those little nooks in between those boards in the lower right-hand picture, debris will have gone there already. Fine fuels, easy to ignite by embers. That's a pretty big fire that will result. It takes a pretty phenomenal deck to resist that kind of flame, and most of them won't do it. Flames, I mean, decks are attached to your home. So that burning deck will result in flames touching your home, breaking glass in windows, black glass in your sliding glass door, and entering your house that way. So decks are pretty important. We're going to be talking about some things you can do to them along and along. But this horizontal non-combustible zone or ember resistant zone, it's called a number of things. FireWise calls it the immediate zone. Don't get hung up on the title, get hung up on what you want it to be. And that is an area that is able to resist ember ignitions. And you need to couple that horizontal zone with a vertical zone. You want to have that ground to wall intersection be non-combustible as possible. Your vertical zone is typically taken care of with your concrete foundation, whether it be a slab on grade or perimeter, raised floor perimeter type. The right-hand picture is just an example from an IBHS experiment that we ran when I was there, where we had siding going all the way to the ground. That's the zero clearance middle picture. And then we had two other examples of non-combustible zones, 6 inches to the right and 2 inches to the left. No ignitions occurred with any kind of clearance. Ignition did occur with zero clearance. And I think really, so 2 you can see works, but I think it depends on really how non-combustible is that zone. If you have ground cover that can burn, then you would want more, because you can have flames that can be short but still reach that 2-inch part. So really it depends on how good is that non-combustible zone or that ember resistant zone. Radiant heat, if you have homes close to each other, then one burning home can damage the other. This is, as you can see, it's a Tennessee fire. Thanks to Leon, who is on this meeting today, but Leon and I spent a fair amount of time in this area in Eastern Tennessee, looking at the post fire effects of this. So thanks, Leon Cons, for inviting me to do this. And you can see these are nominally cabins, but they're 3 to 5 story buildings hanging off those Eastern Tennessee hills. And the right hand and the left hand picture, excuse me, the left and the right hand picture are sort of the same scene, so to speak. The left hand picture is 15 minutes before the right hand picture, but that little house with the little flame and that under eave area in the left is the same home that's sort of fully engulfed in the right. And it's all because of radiant heat. So radiant heat broke glass in the window on that left-hand home and fire entered. So radiant heat can be important, particularly if you have a burning neighbor. And we saw that in the Tubbs fire, Coffee Park, where there's a lot of home-to-home ignition scenarios. So I'm not saying that radiant heat can't be important, but if all homes are able to resist embers, then this sort of urban conflagration has less chance of happening. And so in order to think about that, I want you to think about the home you're looking at or your home in terms of its location. And we have a few scenarios here that seem sort of relevant. If you're on a large lot and your neighbor's a long way away, so let's say 50 feet or more, we talk about 30 feet in this area. And that Eastern Tennessee fire that Leanne and I did the post-fire on, the average distance between homes that were destroyed were 35 feet, 34, 35 feet. So it's in that neck of the woods. There's some upcoming research at IBHS in collaboration with NIST and CAL FIRE that's going to get a better handle on this whole building separation number in terms of when you need to start worrying. So there is research coming down the road that will help us fine tune this number a little bit better. In any event, if your neighbor's a long way away, it's all about the ember, assuming good defensible space. If you're on a steep slope, you need to worry about things downslope because of what fire does, burning upslope. And if your neighbor is really close by, let's say 30 feet or so or away or less, then it's ember and other things. The siding becomes more important in terms of what kind of material it is. Your windows become much more important in terms of a tempered glass, double pane, and the like. So we'll want to sort of talk about this in the publication that our group prepared. We talk a lot about what you can do under these different kinds of scenarios. This picture is just to, I think a lot of people think that with non-combustible siding, you're good for the duration. Here are just some examples that indicate it's not necessarily the case. Cedar Fire, upper left-hand picture, Cedar Fire 2003, San Diego County, very much a non-combustible cladding, but embers did something that resulted in the ignition of this home. And then the big box store, Santa Rosa Tubbs Fire on the lower right, that store is gutted, but it's a really still intact non-combustible wall. Probably the happiest people here are the owners of the Dollar Tree store and other stores in that strip mall, because this non-combustible wall in the big box store serves somewhat as a radiant shield to the other parts of that strip mall. So non-combustible cladding can be important, but it's not always the only thing. And we're going to end with just a couple of examples. And I think the point here is the message here is that there are a number of standard fire tests that are conducted on materials. I think it's important for you to understand what that rating, for example, tells you and what it doesn't tell you. So for example, we always talk about have a Class A fire rated roof covering. Well, that Class A part of the roof covering tells you about what occurs in the red circle area. It doesn't tell you about the other vulnerabilities that the roof might give to the home. And those are demonstrated in these yellow square areas. We saw what the gutter debris burning can do to the edge of the roof. Well, that's a flames to the edge of the roof, not to the roof itself. And so you want to make sure that the edge of the roof can be protected also. And the fire rating doesn't tell you about that. The roof to wall, the fire rating of the roof covering does not tell you how that roof is going to act where the roof meets some other material. You want to make sure that those other edge kind of issues are addressed separately. Okay, so that's thing one. And then, so here we have an example of that, where you have an edge issue where embers can get in underneath the roof covering. Here we have on the right hand, well, all of these are sort of non-combustible coverings that have gaps between the covering and the roof deck itself. Embers can get in between these areas, and before the embers go there, debris will have gone there, or a bird will have gone there and built a nest. So you have a lot of fine fuels you need to be protected from. The fire rating of the roof covering material doesn't tell you how the roof is going to respond to these areas. So in these cases, you need to plug those areas so that debris can't get there, and nor can embers. Finer mesh screen. So we always talk about venting. I think here the message is you need to consider other consequences. So it's very clear that fine mesh screen does a much better job of reducing the number and definitely reducing the size of the ember that can enter into that attic space in this case, but it could be a crawl space or other space on the other side of the screen. The finer the mesh screen, however, the easier it is to plug it up. So we have painted over 1/16 of an inch mesh screen in the upper left-hand picture, and debris accumulation in this 1/8 of an inch mesh screen in the lower right-hand picture. is you just have to acknowledge that there will be a maintenance burden on the homeowner that they need to accept, because these screens are really there for two reasons. One, a moisture maintenance, a moisture management perspective. So you want to allow for airflow in and out that would take moisture with it. In some cases, it's a temperature regulating device too. But in order to, allow that to happen, you still and the other thing is to keep rodents out, for example, so critters. We are going to finer mesh screen for the wildfire part. Just remember that when you go that way, it does make a little bit of more burden on the homeowner to keep these screens cleaned, or to avoid painting over them, as we see in the upper left-hand picture. So anyway, I think enough said on that. So the last picture is just, again, to take these sort of three scenarios: steep slope construction, dense neighborhood, large parcel, and to think about the home and property, thing by thing, and to understand interaction. So make sure you have the differential space taken care of. You'll notice that this is an older version. It doesn't have ember resistant zone. It has non-combustible zone. Don't get hung up on the title. Think about your roof, the roof itself, and then things where roof meets other materials. Think about your siding, the exterior wall, the eave area, this vertical non-combustible zone, things about your window. What can you do to siding? Is it necessary to do anything to the siding? If you have a complex roof, you can sometimes replace siding locally, just up there, not everywhere. It's a cheaper way to go. Anyway, and then so vents, the mesh size, whether or not to go to one of the flame and ember resistant types that are available in California and elsewhere. And then attachments would be decks, fences. So you're going to want to address all of these items in the document and the manuscript that we prepared by this group. We'll have stuff about all this information about all these components, and there's other sources of information also. So that's it. I think we'll stop there, and we'll take questions. But I know I gotta stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. That was super informative. I got a lot out of that. So before we hop into our celebrity interview / Q&A session, Christina is going to launch a couple polling questions for us, just to see, where everyone's at right now. So Christina, if you want to go ahead and launch those. And if you haven't signed on to Menti yet, you can go ahead and hop on your phone and go to menti.com and use the code right there up at the top. And Christina, I'll pass it over to you.
Yep, sorry, I was explaining that, realized I was muted. So throughout the whole day here, we will be using this feature, just in case you weren't here at the beginning. So if you go to menti.com, and then you can use the code on the top, 9305985. That will be the code for the whole day. A lot of people are saying vents. It's so funny, when we practiced this, we all put in vents too as our suggestion of what seemed like the biggest opportunity for retrofitting. That, and then again, I would also say that 0 to 5 foot ember resistant zone really is a low hanging fruit in terms of really bringing that home hardening concept to your property. Screens, vents, roof, siding, deck, vents and clearances. Seems like we're getting a lot of the same types of answers here. Vents in the non-combustible zone. That definitely is the place I started on my home, is with vents and the not using metal meshing, making sure it's non-combustible. Metal screening certainly is the right step there. So I'll let folks keep entering things here, and then Amanda, I will pass it back to you. Even though I'm going to stop the screen share here, folks, you still have the opportunity to continue entering answers. All right, back to you, Amanda.
Great, thanks, Christina. A lot of awesome answers on there. Thank you everyone for participating. It really helps make it more interactive. So we're gonna go ahead and go into what we call a celebrity interview with Steve. It's essentially a Q&A session. What you can do to get a little more out of this is at the top right corner of your Zoom screen, you should see a box that says speaker view. You can go ahead and click that so you just see who's talking at the moment. It helps a little bit. All right, so Steve, let's talk about decks. We have a lot of questions about decks. Are there any non-combustible deck options out there for folks looking to build a new deck or retrofit their current deck? And then we have a couple things about decks in the chat too. Susan Piper is wondering if redwood decking is a good choice. And Bonnie is wondering how combustible is Trex decking. So let's go into decks.
Yeah, decks is one of my favorite topics. There's been a lot of research done on decks. So we'll start at the beginning. Are there non-combustible options? There are non-combustible options. Most of these are metal. There are metal deck board options these days. If you just do a web search on metal deck boards, you'll get a few. And the other non-combustible option would be lightweight concrete solid surface deck. This can be just a flat out lightweight concrete. You can also have one where you might put flagstone or some other kind of rock surface on it. These decks, these solid surface decks, are typically more expensive, so you have to consider that. All except for the metal ones, all of the wood and plastic composite decks, they are combustible. I think when we start talking about decks, I think the most important thing to remember is that decks can be threatened from fire from below and embers from above. And you can control the fire from below with an effective defensible space and not storing combustible things under it. And if you can minimize that fire from below part, and all you need to worry about is embers from above part, then research that we've done at IBHS pretty clearly indicate that the higher density woods, like every plastic composite, and the higher density wood ones, such as Ipe, there are a number of tropical hardwood products that are available. Ipe is probably the most common one. Ipe is spelled I-P-E, in case you're, get that. But those are the higher density things are more resistant to ember ignitions. The moderately density ones like redwood and like cedar, those are very much more vulnerable to ignition from embers. If you have a redwood or a cedar deck, I mean, redwood decks are very common, then it's important to to remove debris from the between deck board gaps if you have an existing deck, because that's where ignitions will occur, is in those gaps between deck boards. And one thing you can do that is relatively inexpensive is it'll result in damage to your deck, but not damage to your home. And that is to remove a deck board or two right next to your house and replace it with a non-combustible option. This can be a metal deck board, it can be a metal grate. That just sort of separates the house from, it's like this non-combustible zone, only it's on your deck. This is a much easier thing to do if your deck boards are parallel to the home. If they are perpendicular to the home, it's definitely a heavier lift. It's doable, but it's just harder. So let's sort of stop there, and let's see if there's any other follow-up questions. I see there's a lot of things coming in on the chat. I just can't read them.
Yeah, we have a lot of follow-up questions coming in here. It looks like you answered quite a few of them. We have one though from Cheryl. Redwood decking is allowed in Fire Zone 2 code. Could you explain that?
Redwood decking is allowed. Currently, there is a standard test method or procedure that in the state of California that decking tests to if you're a combustible decking. So if you're a plastic rubber composite deck manufacturer, or if you're a redwood manufacturer or whatever, you can have your deck board evaluated by this particular standard test. And if it passes this test, it can be used. So untreated redwood does pass this test. I think there are some more recent research that sort of indicates its vulnerability to embers in particular. And so these things I'm talking to you about are sort of strategies that can reduce the vulnerability of a redwood deck to your home. These embers ignite redwood pretty easily by lodging in those between deck board gaps. You have pretty small fires that propagate, every which way, but the most important direction is to your home. And if you have a non-combustible barrier there, then it'll stop there. So you'll be repairing your deck, but not your home. But redwood does comply with this particular test procedure. I think there's just some things we know now about the vulnerability of redwood decks in particular that wasn't really known when that test method was adopted.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I see a lot of decks here in Tahoe that overhang slopes, and I never thought about replacing just a couple of the deck boards. That's a really good idea. We only have time for about one more question here before we move on, but I've heard a lot of homeowners ask about fire retardant coatings and paints that they could potentially paint over the siding of their home. What do you think about these coatings and paints? Do they work, and are they worth it? And looks like we actually got a couple questions about that in the chat as well.
So I mean, I think arguably a coating would be the least expensive thing you can do to enhance or reduce the vulnerability of siding and other surfaces. So you might say maybe to a deck also, to the underside, for example. But research has shown that these kind of coatings, and they're nominally, most of them have an intumescent quality. So these are paints that swell when they get hot, like subject to elevated radiant heat exposure or direct flame contact. They don't weather well. And so they will work well the day after you apply them, the week after you apply them, but they have an unknown certain service life. The experiments that we conducted, we only evaluated products that said they were good for 5 years, and they were no different than uncoated wood, after less than a year. So I think there's an interest from paint manufacturers to have a product that works. I know that some of them are doing a lot of research to try to get either formulation or application procedures correct. So I would say today it's not really a viable option, but in the future, I can't imagine that it won't be. I think my message to you as a potential user is that if you're approached, or if you are interested in using a coating, your first question is to see the results of fire testing after weathering. You want to know that the product works after weathering. You want to know what are they basing their it's good for X years number on? They have to have done some kind of testing after some kind of weathering. Typically, it's going to be an accelerated weathering procedure, just because you're not going to want to put a paint outside for 10 years before you start selling it. You know, people don't have that kind of patience, but there are accelerated weathering procedures where, you know, you put it in a box and it's raining or sunny or doing something adverse weather-wise 24/7, and you want to understand how they're judging the longevity of their coating based on what. And yeah, and so intimate coatings, Jerry, is what I was talking about. So intimate coatings are the common type, and you want to make sure that they have that the duration in an exterior environment has been sort of determined with some sort of experiments.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I can imagine that just with all of the snow here in Tahoe, I can see how weathering would reduce the effectiveness a little bit. Thank you so much for all of your answers, and thank you everyone for asking questions. There will be another opportunity to answer questions, but we are running low on time. So unfortunately, we do have to move on, but I am going to pass facilitation over to Carly, and we're moving on into our next activity. And so if you want to turn your camera back on for the breakout rooms, you can. All right, Carly, it's passing over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Amanda and Steve. That was really informative. And again, we will have more opportunities for Q&A, but I do want to also direct you all to the workshops that we did previously. I think a lot of these questions were answered in those workshops. So I highly encourage you to look at those workshops, specifically the workshop for building professionals. We went into a lot of details on all these questions. So if your question doesn't get answered, that's a great place to look as well. So we are now going to go into breakout rooms again. So Nicole is going to add a link into the chat box that has a Google folder link to it. And in this Google folder, there are lots of pictures of houses with some good and some bad home hardening pieces and defensible space pieces, because as Steve said, it takes both home hardening and defensible space. And so we're all going to go into these rooms. It's going to be about 10 people per room, and we're going to be in there for a decent amount of time, about 30 minutes. And we really hope that you'll all work with your group and look through the photos. And the photos, so we ask that once you get in there, choose one kind of lead person to do a screen share in that group. And Amanda's going to let everybody screen share. But just pick one person to screen share and talk through those photos and really focus on how you would communicate this topic to homeowners. What would you recommend? What kind of compromises would you allow for? So when you're in these rooms, we will also have kind of our quote unquote experts. So of course, Steve Quarles, as well as a couple others who have worked on the publication, popping throughout the rooms in and out. So as you're in there, if Steve or somebody else just randomly pops in, that's your opportunity to ask some specific questions and to really dive into the details around home hardening. So with that, I think, Christina, are we ready to go into the breakout rooms?
We sure are.
Perfect. And again, nobody has to do anything. You'll just be automatically sent, and then you'll be brought back after 30 minutes. So enjoy your conversations. I think we're ready, Christina.
All right. Start seeing people roll on in.
Okay, looks like
There's
people
Jamie.
are...
Hi, Jamie. All right, people are coming back.
All right. Okay, looks like people are trickling in. We'll wait a few more seconds while the rest of the rooms close.
Yeah, we've still got 30 seconds till the rooms officially close. And I know I'm always like, wait, let's finish what we're saying.
I know, me too. It's always like till the last word gets cut in half.
Yeah.
All right, a little more trickling in. I love seeing everybody come in, like obviously have been mid-conversation. It's kind of fun to see folks. But we will keep videos off just for our bandwidth issues as folks trickle in.
All right, everyone's coming in now.
Okay.
All right, we're at 2:08.
Okay. All right. While the rest of you come in, I hope that was really great for you. We popped in and out of a lot of different rooms and I heard some great conversations. I hope it really started to get everybody thinking about how would you help prioritize this work with homeowners? How do you communicate this? And again, if you all could turn your videos off just for our bandwidth as you come in, that would be fantastic. But I think that was a really great session, and we will now go to Christina to do another great polling exercise. So Christina, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, so we are going to use again this online tool to report out what we learned in the breakout room. So again, if you go to menti.com, you can use the code 9305985 and start to just enter some thoughts about what you learned in the breakout rooms. So we'll get these running here. Incremental changes, how to prioritize. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. Different states have different code requirements and enforcement policies. That's a really important thing to remember. We generally all have the same struggles with educating homeowners. Absolutely, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. How to prioritize and find compromise that homeowners we're in trouble. That's one way to look at it, but I feel like at least we have the tools in our toolbox to provide some solutions to folks, right? Prioritizing each home's needs. It is difficult to get homeowners to take action. How to talk with homeowners. That's a really key piece. Most homeowners prefer view and charm over fire safety. I find this to be particularly true with second homeowners, where it's been really hard to convince folks that live in my neighborhood in Tahoe to do anything about their home. Home hardening, ember entry, dangers, lots about other organizations. That's great. That's one thing we want folks to learn about is what other people are doing. Lots of siding to ground, poor house maintenance. You know, that's interesting thinking about folks not having that concrete foundation at the bottom of their home and having the siding go all the way to the ground. Veg is a huge issue. Absolutely. Ways to convince homeowners to do some work, $500 in a weekend of work. That doesn't seem like a lot in the scheme of things. You know, I always try to convince my neighbors. I live down in the eastern Sierra Nevada, and I try and explain to them, homeowners insurance, yeah, you may have it, but it's going to take a long time to get that home rebuilt, and you're only going to have loss of use coverage for 1 year on most insurance plans. And so if you're just expecting insurance to replace your home after a fire, it's not really a good plan. Maintenance is key. Defensible space is easier than home hardening, more money needed. Underdeck latticing, non-combustible veg options, a lot of really great things that folks learned here. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, what do you see as the biggest barrier to get people to implement home hardening techniques? And some of that came up in the last slide, but I think that this is really where we can learn from each other of kind of what are the hurdles that we're seeing. And this also helps us when we're putting together these workshops to understand what additional tools we can give folks. For some reason, I'm not seeing the answers here though, folks. I'm gonna see if I can. I see folks are entering the answers, but I'm just not seeing them. Let me see if I can. No. Well, sorry that we're not seeing the answers there, people, but I will be able to see them at the end. So thank you for the feedback. Just want to make sure that
one thing, owners don't want to give up architectural integrity over function sometimes, And that is a battle.
Here we go.
You know, you have to do this because it will save the entire structure, but it doesn't look good. And that's a challenge for all of us as we're trying to retrofit in homes. And that's been one of my biggest hurdles. I'm out.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like time and money, view, etc. Sorry for the hiccup there on that, but let's move to the next one. Are some strategies to overcome the common barriers that we face when trying to communicate with folks about this, trying to get to some solutions, some things that you all have learned over time work. And then this will be our last quick activity before we move into the break. Having good local examples, available chipping programs, education about what the actual risks are. And I think that's excellent. I've got folks here in my neighborhood that just planted a bunch of conifers 4 feet from their house after I gave them a guide of what to do, because they think, well, the house is just going to burn down no matter what if there's a fire. That's just not true. Community group buy-in. Let's start with small things to do. Low-cost loans. Share evidence-based research. Educate, empower. I like that one. Take it step by step. Spread it out over time so it's not as overwhelming. Grants, networking, and connections locally. Having it be a community-wide effort. It's part of being an engaged community member, right? Praise work that's already been done. And I saw at the beginning having some options or some examples of what works. These are all really set their house on fire. Let's not do that. HOA partnerships, have communities help. This is all really great advice. Folks can continue to enter answers into this and we will have these, but I'm going to go ahead and let Carly excuse us to the break.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. That was really fantastic. So we are just a couple of minutes into our break, but we will reconvene at 10:50 and we'll be diving into another Q&A session with Steve. And this time you'll have an opportunity to come off mute and ask Steve a question. So be thinking of questions and we will reconvene at 10:50. So have a great break. Just stay in this room. Don't close out or anything. And we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Started break a little late. We'll wait a minute for folks to hop in. But I'll just give an overview of what's next. So we will be diving into that Q&A session with Steve right soon. And then after that, we're going to go into 2 large breakout rooms to really dive into communicating about home hardening. And so I really hope that that session will allow us all to talk through how do you help folks compromise? How do you communicate these topics that are more complex, things of that nature. So I'm going to give it just about 1 more minute while people are hopping in. And Amanda, are you back online?
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. Is there anything going on in the chat that we can check out right now? Any big questions or anything that we should all be aware of?
It looks like folks are chatting about some publications. Megan Kay from UNR Extension listed a pretty cool publication called Choosing the Right Plants. So folks looking for stuff on vegetation should definitely check that out. And then we have a couple questions here. Do we want to go into them now or should we wait for the Fishbowl?
Perfect. We will hold off. I will make sure to address them in our Q&A. So thanks for that update, Amanda. All right. Well, we are at 10:51. So let's dive into this, what we're calling the Fishbowl exercise. So before we go into that, I'm just going to give you another opportunity to brush up on some of those more difficult Zoom pieces that we're going to be using for this exercise. So we will be, again, calling on people to enter into a conversation with Steve. So how this will work is I'm going to be queuing it off and asking Steve a couple of questions. And then if you would like to join the conversation, you will raise your hand. And again, how you raise your hand is in your participant panel. If you click on participants, there's a raise hand button there. And if you're unable to figure out that feature, no worries. You can just shoot us a chat in the chat box and we will see that you want to join the conversation. So with that, I am going to stop my screen share, and I encourage you all to go back into that speaker view rather than gallery view on Zoom so that you can better see Steve and whoever he is talking about going back and forth. So the first question I have here for you, Steve, is, let me see. So we've talked a lot about decks. It seems like people want a little more about decks, which is fantastic. I think in a lot of those photos that we shared in the breakout rooms, a lot of them had decks as well. So the question that I have here is that, I know that you're not a defensible space inspector per se, but what compromises would you be willing to recommend? So say if somebody can't afford to replace their entire deck, what is like the one key piece of recommendation that you would have for them?
So I would have two key pieces of recommendation. One is to make sure you keep debris out of between the gap board gaps, sort of remove debris from there sort of regularly. And then remove it if your deck boards are parallel to your house, remove that deck board right next to your house and replace it with a non-combustible option. You can buy a metal grate that just sort of slides right in there, or a metal deck board, one of those two.
Perfect. Thanks. But I know we've talked, go ahead.
Well, I can't really though say enough times that not having combustible things under your deck is really important. Because all of these things you do about the metal deck board and debris mean not a whit if you have a lot of stuff stored under your deck.
Yep, perfect. And I know a couple of those photos that we saw today had a lot stored under decks. And I know what people store into there is usually like firewood and things very combustible. So right. Seems like a very bad idea. I'm just scrolling through. I don't see anybody with their hand raised yet, but please, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand. The next question that I have are vents. So again, people are really eager to learn more about vents. So again, thinking about those compromises, Steve. So as I understand it, vents can be kind of expensive, especially those new types of vents that are ember resistant type of vents can be fairly expensive to outfit your entire home on. So what would you recommend on two sides of things? So if cost isn't an issue, and then if cost is an issue, what's the best route to go if you have the money, and then the cheapest route to go if you don't necessarily have the money right now that people can recommend to homeowners?
So let's just take a minute and talk about venting in general. You're going to have inlet vents on your house, and that's going to be in the under eave area, and you're going to have outlet vents, so outlet air vents, and that's going to be on your roof, so a through roof vent, either ridge vent or off ridge vent, or a gable end vent. And sometimes you have a combination of these, but you're usually going to have under eave and then another option for inlet, and then another option for outlet. So if you so you need to look at where your vents are. If you have an open eave, under eave, so when you look up and you can see rafter tails and blocking, and you have vents in there, those vents are vulnerable to ember entry and will be vulnerable to flame. So make sure that your mesh is in good condition in those areas, and use 1/8 of an inch mesh if you have 1/4 of an inch mesh. So, and that would be true for no matter what kind of vent you have in the under eave area. If you have gable end vents, those are larger. You want to make sure that the mesh is fixed there, so reduce that. You don't need to go into the attic necessarily. You can do this from the outside, whichever side is easier to access is where you want to replace the mesh or repair it.
Perfect.
If cost isn't an issue, then the flame and ember resistant vents are a good option, but you are looking at for gable end vents, you're looking at $30 to $40 per. And for under eave area, you know, they're cheaper just because typically they're smaller.
Okay.
And don't forget that you have crawl space vents also if you're built on a raised floor foundation.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Steve, we have a few hands raised, so I'm going to call on Adrian, I think had their hand up first. So Adrian, if you don't mind coming off mute and you can join and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. I'm going to stick with my stuck record thing about firewood piles. We have hundreds of firewood piles in our neighborhood. I mean, hundreds. And there may be one that I've seen in ever that had what looked like it might be a so-called fire resistant tarp over it. So state, you know, my little, you know, stump speech is state law requires firewood piles to be more than 30 feet away from the house or covered with a fire resistant tarp, but nobody thinks it's their job to enforce. There is no enforcement. And I don't think there ever will be unless, and this is why my question is for you, Steve, unless we had a dramatic video to show at town council, for example, or at the board meeting of the fire protection district, showing a firewood pile in your ember chamber, you know, catching fire and, you know, destroying the whole facility, that type of visual might cause some people to say, whoa, this is a problem. And I could be wrong. Maybe it's not a problem, but it sure looks like one to me. Do you have any actual testing of a firewood pile and how fast they ignite, or the effectiveness or non-effectiveness of these so-called labeled fire-resistant tarps? Anything concrete would be really helpful in trying to get enforcement or cooperation without enforcement.
All right, thanks, Adrian. So we did do that back in the day, like 2011 or so. We did do an ember ignition scenario of a firewood pile. I have to say that I think this is a vulnerable location because debris gets there also. And so this demonstration did have pine needle debris inside of that pile. But I'll if you send either me an email or just send it to, you know, I think Carly will give an email address for this effort, and she'll forward it to me, and I'll get that to you so that there's that one thing. I can also provide for you pictures from a Southern California fire I went to that clearly showed damage to a home from a firewood pile located close to the home. So that would have been a radiant heat thing. There were broken windows, and so I can show you that. The tarp question is an interesting one. I am working on a project with my colleagues at Fire Safe Marin, and we're in the process of buying some of these tarps and to get some visuals for them. The fire retardant tarps have to pass a certain test. It's a common test that they pass is NFPA 701, and there's a CPIA, a Canvas product organization, test 84. I think they're similar. So they do have to pass a particular test, but so I can share that information with you also if you send me a follow-up email.
Yeah, I do. I do know what the test is, and frankly, it's not very reassuring because it's a matter of seconds of resisting of ignition. And the bigger issue is not just this test of this material, and that's one of my problems with all of the stuff from NFPA standards, is that they're like ASTM standards. They're these lab conditions, and in actual application, even if they worked really well, nobody puts them and secures them to the ground so that when we have the high winds that we always have when we have these fires, I mean, we need a real world test, not an NFPA test. Otherwise, why are we talking about them?
So
That's a-
a point taken, and we'll get something for you, but
Yeah,
I
that-
don't have it today.
Those are all really great points. Thank you for bringing that up, and we will keep moving on. Steve, we have several hands raised in about 8 more minutes. So we'll try, if you're asking a question, just try to ask it fairly quick so that we can get through a few more. But no worries, Steve, you're doing a great job on your answers. So I think the next hand raised was Alice, and then we saw Lynn pop in. So Alice, do you mind coming off mute and asking your question?
Yes, this actually comes coming right off of Adrian's. Steve, I've really been wondering about this. I love that so much of this is from the studies going on in the lab, but I do wonder what your feelings are about the other main studies that are going on about the same subject by, say, Sifford and Keeley, where they're looking at the real world, they're doing those studies. And I wonder, though, if you feel that they're just kind of shottering, that without looking at everything, how it goes together, whether you feel like those studies are useful or not. For example, the one where it shows that closing in eaves is so critical. But again, for those of you who aren't familiar with the studies, they just kind of look at homes that have survived versus ones that have burned, and they kind of look at what features they think might be. And I really would love to hear what your thoughts are on the value or not value of those kinds of studies and how it fits with yours.
So thanks. I think those studies are valuable. I do think, though, that houses ignite typically via small ignitions that get big, so small fires that get large, and those are inevitably detail-oriented kind of things. And so we learn where I think we are now sort of in a learning phase in terms of what's important, and so these bigger picture studies help because they do sort of clarify at a high level. And I do believe still that the smaller scale studies that I've been associated with are important, because inevitably it comes down to a detail that results in ignition or not. And as you know, our famous Jack Cohen says, it's the little things. And I do believe that typically there are little things that really matter a fair amount. So, but I appreciate the question.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve and Alice. Okay, we saw Lynn popped in. Lynn, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
I'm not sure which Lynn you're talking about, but am I being heard?
Yes,
You are.
We'll go with you, Lynn.
Okay, I'm going to make this really simple, no editorial. I think I asked this before. There's been a lot of discussion in our HOA about screening for the windows, for the vents, for screening under the deck. And it's kind of important to know what material are we talking about. We know we don't want it to be combustible, but what's on the market that you know about this 1/8 inch that we can use, and where can I tell them to go get it?
So 1/8 of an inch mesh screen is a good go-to. It's typically corrosion resistant, so it has a zinc coating. You can get it in many lumber yards. If the lumber yard that you visit doesn't have it in a prominent place in the size, let's say, that you want, if you do a web search, and you have to web search on wire cloth. Wire cloth will get you to a number of websites that will sell a variety of mesh sizes and meshes. So in terms of mesh size and dimension of it. And I think you'll have a lot of options there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lynn. The next person with their hand up was Pete Jucker. So Pete, do you mind coming off mute and asking your question?
Yes, my question is, did I come off mute?
You did.
Yeah, it looks like.
Yep. You're off.
My question is about underdeck lattice work. We have a lot of our places that are still decorated with lattice work. And to start with, I started recommending screening behind it, But that brought up a thought, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you put even 1/8 inch screening behind lattice work, don't you now make hundreds or thousands of little places where embers can actually land and make a ledge there that the lattice work can still catch on fire? Wouldn't it be better to get rid of the lattice work and just create an ember-free zone underneath the deck?
So thanks, Pete. I think the answer to your question, you've answered it. It's definitely better just to get rid of the lattice. I can understand the desire to have lattice there as sort of a visual screen from what's behind it, and there should be nothing combustible behind it. But to your point, we have done some research on lattice and other kinds of fencing materials, and lattice actually, because of the space between, it's pretty hard to ignite by embers because embers that lodge, there still has a big distance to the next thing to burn. So they're in other words, they're very porous. So they weren't as bad as you might imagine. If they want to keep this, you want to make sure that you have this separation between the ground and the start of that thing, because if not, it will be ladder fuel burning up the deck. So your first surmisal was, I think, the most appropriate. It should just not be there. If it's going to be there, you need to have these gotcha kind of follow-on discussions about removal of the lower 6 to 12 inches of it, so this is not present near the ground, and then putting that screen in back of it is a great idea.
All right. Thank you both for that one. We are, Steve, because we have a couple more hands raised and we had a little bit of buffer time at the end. We're going to go for another 5 minutes and let this conversation continue with folks, if you're okay with that. Yep. Perfect. Okay. So the next hand I have up is Cheryl, and then Michael will go after Cheryl. So Cheryl, if you don't mind coming off mute.
Okay. Hi, my name is Cheryl Drinkwater. I'm in Berkeley, California. And
Hi,
Steve, great to see you. I have a question about things I'm seeing in reports of fires, especially in Southern California, about firefighting foam being sprayed on houses during or just prior to a fire. I'm sure it's similar to the paint, the intumescent paint, that it wouldn't last very long. But I have started to see advertising and sort of promotion of spraying your house down with foam. Definitely what must appear to homeowners as an easy way out, just instantly deploy, you know. And I just wondered what you thought of that. It just seems like it could be too good to be true or doesn't really work. I was wondering if you had done any testing.
The answer is yes, thanks for your question. So I think we need to distinguish between gel, foam, and coating. So the coating we talked about earlier, these are intended to be long-term. You're supposed to put them on and forget about it. So we've already sort of talked about how you shouldn't be relying on them because they don't have a good service life right now. The gel and the foam are really intended to be active measures. So you put them on and you know they're only there and effective for a short term. They're intended to be short term. They're something that you would do immediately before evacuation, or as you're preparing to evacuate, one of the things you're doing, like closing your windows. So you really want to focus on gels, not foams. Foams you use, there's a sort of a technical difference, but foams you use when you're putting out a fire that's actually burning. A gel is a precautionary thing. It's a lot of, it's a polymer that has a lot of water tied to it. And as soon as you spray it on, it starts to dry out. And we did do some experiments in conjunction with UNC, University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and within 3 hours of applying, it was just like it wasn't there. So I don't recommend gel for a homeowner. If you wait so long to apply it, you might get caught before you evacuate. So I think you're better off developing and having an effective defensible space zone, for example, and doing things to the home, near the home, to help it resist embers, and not do the gel thing. If you're interested in this paper that we wrote send an email to Carly and then I'll make that available to you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, you sort of answered how I was hoping in that I don't want people who come to say, hey, what about these foams? You know, I don't want them to have a false sense of security that they could just easily spray their house down and evacuate and it's a done deal. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. All right, Steve, we're going to take one more question here from Michael. I know you've had your hand up for a while, Michael, so I think we're ready for you now.
Thanks. I live in San Anselmo, Marin County. I work with Fire Safe Marin a lot. And I live in a post and pier foundation. So in fact, there's about a 1 to 2 foot gap around the bottom of the house, between the bottom of the house and the ground. I've skirted that with 16th inch window screen mesh. First, I started with 1/8 inch and found the 16th to be both easier to work with and in theory, I was told better. But I just wanted to hear your opinion on that. Also, I also layered some of that behind some lattice work that I don't want to remove. But there you go.
So thanks, Michael. Send me a picture of your post and pier foundation. It's sort of an uncommon, not very common construction type around here anyway. I live in Mill Valley. So when you say window screen, do you mean the plastic clad fiberglass type or is it metal? That's my first question.
Aluminum.
Okay.
Aluminum.
Okay. I think you're great. That 16th of an inch, the embers that pass through are really tiny. I would maybe take some time on a regular basis to remove debris from the base of the screen, at the ground to screen, because you'll have a lot of debris accumulation there. But in terms of an enclosure technique, you're enclosing the entire underside. There's still a lot of airspace for air to move, so you shouldn't have any kind of moisture issue going on down there. I think you're fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for participating in that. I think it went really well, especially given the size of our group. So I recognize not everybody's questions were answered. And so I highly recommend that you all watch our previous workshop recordings. I think we had a lot of these similar discussions during those recordings, so you might find some answers there. And then also feel free to email us, and Nicole will add that email to the chat box. Again, it's fire@tahoercd.org. And we have a direct line to Steve, whether he likes it or not. And I will get all of your unanswered questions answered. Okay, so Amanda, I just wanted to do a brief check-in with you on the chat. Is there anything aside from questions that we need to check in on, or anybody saying anything exciting?
Yeah, we have quite a few questions. Kathleen has also said, thank you everyone for insightful and great information. So thanks, Kathleen. And then we also have some links that have been posted from folks. So folks are chatting with each other, which is always really great to see.
Perfect. Okay, great. So now, Amanda, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce our final breakout activity.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to say thanks again to Steve for all of that, and thanks to everyone for participating. I am definitely getting a lot out of this. So without further ado, we'll move into our next activity. Now that we know the home hardening basics and we're feeling more comfortable with these topics, we're going to learn about communicating them. So the activity we're going to do is called a shift and share. So we're going to split up into 2 separate breakout rooms. And one room we'll hear from David Rodriguez of North Tahoe Fire Protection District. And the other room we'll hear from Mike Vollmer with the Nevada Division of Forestry. And then after about 15 minutes, David and Mike will switch rooms. So everyone will have the opportunity to hear from both of them. David will be focusing on communicating and encouraging home hardening through the development process. And Mike will focus on home hardening through defensible space inspections and community risk assessments. They both have a wealth of knowledge, so please feel free to ask them questions after their presentations, and we will again use the raise hand feature. And David and Mike, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you, and I know I'm going to learn a ton in the next session. So Carly and I will also be in each of the rooms to help facilitate the questions, so we can kind of manage the raise hand feature, and we'll be there if you need anything. So I think we're ready for the breakouts. Christina, if you're ready for us.
Yep. Have fun.
All right. Thanks again to Mike and David. I learned a lot from that. So that was really, really useful for me. I think we're about ready for our next poll. So Christina, if you want to go ahead and launch that.
Yep, sounds good. So again, we are going to go to menti.com. The code is there on the top. And we just want to understand what you guys learned. We're going to have, there's a few questions here. We're going to have some opportunities to collect some constructive feedback. And you'll see on some of the slides, the results are actually hidden. But on this one here, we say, what is your comfort with home hardening concepts now? So you can answer, I feel ready. And this is going from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And so you can answer the questions here. Again, we're keeping these results hidden just so folks can feel like they can answer freely. But we have some other ones that will be more of a sharing opportunity so that we can just see what folks had to say. So I'll give folks a few minutes to answer these questions. You can see the tally on the bottom there of how many have answered. So we'll just keep going another second here. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide here and ask folks to tell us about their experience at the workshop today. So going from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So I learned new information I did not already know. I really enjoyed the variety of activities today. The instructions were easy to follow, and I found the polling feature useful and informative. This is just for us to understand how well the event went, what folks learned, and this helps us to be more effective in the future when it comes to running our events. And again, this is a hidden result, so please feel free to be honest. And again, when I shift to the next slide, you can still continue to answer on this, and then you'll have an opportunity to answer the next slide. Okay, now this is open for everyone to see. What was your favorite part about today's workshop? So would love to get some feedback for folks on what they liked best, what activities worked the best, what information was the best. And let's see what folks have to say. Connecting with people, the breakout groups. I thought that the breakout groups were great, that we had a lot of opportunity for folks to go and meet other folks a lot. Q&A with Steve, yeah, that was super fun. Being able to ask questions from experts, all of it. Oh, shucks, thanks guys. Info about all of the different building materials, open conversation about decks, breakout rooms, Steve Quarles Q&A. Firsthand experience dealing with community groups, open discussions, hearing from folks, lots of good feedback here, interaction with other folks. Great job, Carly and Christina, and Amanda too. Don't forget about Amanda. Great, awesome feedback here, folks. And then what can we improve next time? Again, the results here are hidden, so everyone won't see them. This just helps us understand how we can make these experiences better in the future for folks. So we'll let those answers trickle in a little bit. And I'll just take this chance as some of these answers are coming in to give a plug for my program, the University of Nevada, Reno Cooperative Extension. I'm the director of the Living with Fire program, and we have a lot of information available on our website, which is livingwithfire.com. We have videos and webinars recorded that we've done this year, a lot of different workshops. We have a bunch of publications, and then I'll also suggest the Tahoe livingwithfire.com website as well. All right, moving on to the next slide. What kind of action are you going to take as a result of being here today? So what is something that you will do that you feel excited about doing? And again, this is one that's open for folks to see what other people are answering. Keep learning. Use your pictures in our WUI presentation for the public. Very good. Bring new resources to my Fire Safe Council. Post info on the website. Share with coworkers. Watch more of your videos. We hope you do. Do you have any handouts, checklists, etc.? Yes, we do. On the Living with Fire website, we have evacuation checklists. And we also are about to publish our home hardening guide, which is going to be available both on the Living with Fire website as well as the Tahoe Living with Fire website. Talk about $500 projects. I like that one. Use this information to educate my immediate neighbors. That's exactly what we need to do. Very good. I'm going to keep on moving here just so that folks can get on with their lunch. What would you share with a colleague or peer about what you learned today? And this will be the last question in our polls. So Carly, if you want to start to wrap things up, I can stop the screen share and let you start wrapping
Perfect.
up.
Yes, I will start screen sharing here. Thank you all for responding to those polls. Lots of great information there. So we are nearing the end here officially. And as Christina pointed out, and I mentioned in the beginning, this is part of a larger project. And so after this workshop, we will be sending, once we're able to add captions to the recording and stuff, we will be sending it out to everyone, the recording and some other materials, including the other workshop recordings that we have. So look for those. And we will also have an option for you to sign up to receive an update when the guide is out. Should be out really soon. And again, this is essentially this entire team who you've seen today, this wealth of knowledge, all kind of put into one guide. And so we're really excited to share that with you all. So watch for that follow-up email. And then to kind of wrap things up, I just wanted to give another thank you to all of our partners with this guide. And certainly thank CAL FIRE and the California Climate Investments Program for the financial support. But I also wanted to take this moment, because this is kind of our last hurrah with this project, to give a huge thanks to our core team who's made it through all this together. So Steve Quarles, Christina Restano, Susie Coker, Steve Hawks, Nicole Shaw, and Amanda Malici. Like, I'm so grateful for you all in this great project, and I can't wait to share it with everyone. So again, the recording will be available. Check for that follow-up email. I did mention in the very beginning, if you want to connect with somebody who you were in a breakout room with prior, you can stay in this room and we are happy to put you in a breakout room and let you make that connection again. So just wait for folks to sign off. But this is the end of the workshop, so feel free to sign off. Enjoy your lunch, enjoy your day, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Carly, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Carly.
Great to see you, Barbara.